Welcome everyone to our 3D Printing in the Classroom event. During the next 90 minutes, we're going to explore the truly fascinating world of 3D printing and really look at the value that it has in educating our young people. Joining me on stage are two really terrific thinkers on this topic. I was fortunate enough to interview both of them when we covered 3D printers in schools for a story I did back in January. To my immediate left is David Cawley, who is joining us from the Art Center College of Design. He is the director of rapid prototyping and model shops. David has overseen the expansion of 3D printers at Art Center since he joined the school about 9 years ago. And we also have Miguel Almena. He's a former Disney employee who leads 3D technology training for Pasadena Unified School District teachers. He's also a teacher at Marshall Fundamental High School. These are his students who are here doing the demonstrations in the back. We thank you so much for doing that. And Miguel works, with students teaching 3D printing and design, among other things. So thank you both so much for being here. Thank you. So, David, I was hoping to start with if you could explain, for those of us who are new to this, what are 3D printers? How do they work?
Well, I think for me, really thinking about 3D printing, if you think about, conventional ways of manufacturing or making objects, some of the difficulties and complexities of creating objects. I myself started as an engineer, as a pattern maker, and which is really making wooden forms that ultimately are going to be made into castings. So you're taking complex geometries like engine blocks and complex things, taking blueprints and building these models. When you think of a 3D printer, what it's doing, it's actually taking those components, those models, and breaking them down into 2D layers. So with 3D printing, what happens is you can take very complex things, break it down into layers, and the machine then starts to print this out with different materials, powders or plastics or whatever. And when I first saw that, I thought, okay, I'm there scratching my head, really trying to build these complex models. If there was a way, to simplify that process, 3D printing showed me, eureka. It's a eureka kind of moment that, now you take those objects, you break them into simple 2D layers, stack them together, and you have a 3D printed object. What's happened recently in 3D printing has been a real explosion in the different types of technologies, different materials, different sizes of printers. So 3D printing, I assume most people have probably heard of it or been exposed to it a little bit with the explosion that's going on right now with 3D printing.
Right, there have been so many stories. Just within the last couple of weeks, there was the story Robert Downey Jr. delivered a bionic arm to a patient who needed it, to a young boy. Right. There's so many stories about 3D printing. I think it really kind of captures the public's imagination, but we hear so much less about 3D printing in the classroom, in education. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a sense of when that started happening to as far as you can tell?
Well, I think, again, there's kind of been a rebirth. I think what's driven a lot of the classroom 3D printing is the cost of the machines, the power of the computers and the software to be able to create things for these printers to print. A printer today, a small desktop printer is in a few hundreds of dollars. A few years ago when it was, there was obviously a lot less technology around, the printers that were available were many thousands of dollars. I think price point of entry to 3D printing, if you look around today here at the studio, there's small desktop printers. So I think just the availability of printers is making it more into schools.
Great. Let's go ahead and take a look. We have a video that we were able to do. We came by Art Center and took a look at the amazing variety of 3D printers that you have at Art Center. Let's take a look at the video and we can talk some more about specifics that you're doing at Art Center.
We kind of act as almost like a service bureau within the school to the students who are making the designs. We help them to select which technology to use, fine art pieces right through to cars and trams.
Because of the accuracy and the availability of 3D printing, students can go from a wide range of things that they can make. A lot of the graphic design packaging students are starting to use 3D printing to make not just the package, but also design a representation of the components that go in the package, which in this case is chocolate.
The actual 3D printers touch every discipline throughout the school, so everybody's using it. Fine arts students, product students, trans students. We print thousands of parts per term. And then we also outsource a lot of parts to other institutions. The growth of 3D printing is pretty phenomenal. What's happened with 3D printing in general is the basic cost of the machine has come down and the efficiencies and speeds have gone up.
This is a 3D printer that is, in essence, the same process as the very expensive, bigger ones, but just much more compact, affordable, maybe about $2,000. It's adding plastic layer by layer, as if a tiny hot glue gun is melting the plastic in wheels. You can see the rolls behind here. And this is something that a lot of people already have in their home.
When I came here about 9 years ago, we had 4 3D printers. Those printers have come down. They're a third of the cost. They're twice as fast and twice as reliable. More and more 3D printers are coming into institutions. The idea of putting 3D printers in middle schools and high schools is just going to mean that students who are going to come to Art Center are already exposed to 3D printing, and really our job would be to obviously, go to a higher standard.
Great. So for me visiting, it was incredible to see the variety that you have at Art Center. Perhaps you could show us through some of the stuff you've brought along and explain what was made with what.
Right. I mean, one of the things that's happened in this explosion of 3D printing is the materials, the different materials that are available now. In the past, it was very limited to certain types of resin materials. Today, we have this example, this Lincoln head here, and there's a small one here. These are actually 3D printed with paper. So this is a technology that's taking, 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, basically pulling those pieces of paper together using a very intelligent gluing technology. It actually puts dots of glue, joins the pages, and then a knife, which is, again, something probably from the plotter industry that cuts very quickly, cuts through the 2D layers, and then allows you to, cut blocks around it and break them away, and you can print, all different kinds of objects. And this giant Lincoln head here is 3 reams of paper. So, paper's one thing. Again, there's the green side to the paper machine, everything around this when we make these models goes back into recycle. So we actually just, recycle all the paper. It uses water-based glues. So it's a very green approach to 3D printing. It has limitations in the kinds of geometry and the kinds of uses that you would be able to use a paper model for. Here's another model. This is typically, like you saw in the machine in the video, this is an FDM, or fused deposition model. So this is made from plastic. So again, this model has, a lot of integrity and a lot of functionality. A lot of times when you look into a 3D printer, you're looking for, okay, what am I going to do with that print? What kind of functionality do I need out of it? Is it something that I'm going to make a tool, or is it a part that has to take a certain amount of stress or whatever? So paper as one medium becomes not necessarily a functional part. It may be more of an aesthetic or an art type piece. The plastic models may be more about functionality. And then right from there, going up in terms of functionality to printing metals and things like that. And this thing about prosthetics, I think one of the things that's going on in the industry right now is the ability to create prosthetics and complex models. One of the things about when you do that, when you print prosthetics, you can actually create the file of the part that you're going to print, and as that person grows or changes, it's not about going back to the bench and rebuilding that model. It's about going to the computer, changing the file, scaling that to a person that's constantly changing, or things that are changing. So 3D printing of models and things like this really, are really exciting in different arenas, medical arenas and things like that.
How many of these were made by students?
Some of these parts were files that we take from the internet. There's websites where you can download files. At Art Center, it's primarily a design school, so most of the output is really the students' design. So we're almost, like it said in the video, we're acting as kind of a bureau within the school. Some students really wanted to learn about 3D printing and want to kind of understand the nuts and bolts of how these machines work. It's really exciting to see a printer, just laying down layers and creating these parts. It's really cool. And then there's the kind of person, okay, this is a tool, this is another tool, it's a means to an end. I want to make 4 wheels for my 5th scale car, and I could do that, several ways. I could go to a conventional shop, go on the lathe and do it that way, or I could go and make a digital file and 3D print them. So for students at Art Center, it's really about, picking the right technology to produce that finished part.
Great. So at Pasadena Unified, Miguel, the district is incredibly unique in that it's put a 3D printer in every single school from the elementary to high school level. Can you tell us a bit about what type of printers you're using in your district?
Sure. So the printer that we have currently is an Affinia printer. So the Affinia printer is, it's a pretty standard printer. We have one here today as a sample. It's one of the smaller ones. But it's that's the initial printer. It's basically really strong. It has a steel support, and it's there to basically take hits and things of that sort, because in the classroom anything could happen. So we have that, and then at my particular school we have 2 other models. We have a MakerBot 5th generation printer, and we also have a Stratasys UPrint Plus printer.
Great. And give us a sense, I know at Art Center, the college has been investing in this kind of over a period of years. Explain to us how Pasadena Unified got involved.
So about 2 years ago, we got a very generous donation of a 3D printer, and it was one of the industrial makes, or the UPrint. And initially, it was sort of an experiment. It was almost to see, okay, well, we have this printer. Would you be interested in maybe creating something or maybe having this work in the classroom? And immediately I said yes. I thought this was going to be an amazing tool to work with. One, because I'm a bit of a geek myself. I love all these new tools and technologies, and I really think that every tool is an opportunity to create opportunity for yourself from that. And when I received it, it was basically a question of what can you create out of it? And that's a pretty huge question, right? When you're presented with the question of if you could make anything in the world, what would you make?
Right.
I'll be honest. I took about maybe 2 weeks, just kind of meditating on that and just kind of thinking to myself, what could we create? And it was very simple. Coming from my product experience, I'm a designer, but I also work in product development, product design. Ultimately, the products that we make serve a purpose. So it was very clear at that moment when it kind of dawned on me that we should be creating products that solve certain problems. And if the student can bring in their own personal problems and their own needs and use the technology to create products that solve that problem, we saw some really interesting things in the classroom.
David, when you and I talked for this story, you brought up a really interesting point that you're seeing more and more students who've been exposed to 3D printing when they do get to the college level. Can you talk about that a bit and sort of the shift you're seeing?
Well, again, we during orientation at the school, we'll talk on orientation to students. How many students have heard of 3D printing or been exposed or actually made a file? And there's a steady growth and an increase in students who are being exposed to printing. Obviously, we're a college. When these machines are in high schools and ultimately middle schools, then I think what's going to happen is the expectation in colleges to have this technology and to use this technology is going to increase. It's going to be greater. And again, the way I look at the technology, it's really 3 tiers of technology. There's the home hobby unit that we see here today and that we have at Art Center. And then there's the prosumer level machines that are made by manufacturers who are making more product, bigger machines that can do more, use more materials. And then the really high-end machines that are used in industry and aerospace. So I think the bar is going to just keep rising. I think colleges are going to have machines that are using metals and the higher end. And I think, the tools that students are going to be exposed to in middle schools and high schools are going to be 3D printers of different levels.
To what degree, I'm curious, do you all think that, perhaps could 3D printing replace things like shop class, things that were typically a hallmark of the high school experience?
That's something I ask myself that question all the time, really. Where do you plug in? During orientation, we ask students, how many students have done metal shop, wood shop, been exposed to traditional crafts that, probably older students would remember. I did wood shop, metal shop. Today, those don't exist in the schools. I think, 3D printing could be plugged in place of that. Is 3D printing and 3D printers going to take the place of traditional shop? Are students going to make things by 3D printing them, not by table saws and conventional ways of making things that we did before? And it's really, that's a really difficult question, and I'm always balancing that out. And I think one of the things about the printers and the traditional tools and other things that we have at the school, digital scanning, laser cutters, in other words, just this bigger and bigger expanding toolbox. Which way are the students, which tool are they going to choose?
Right. Miguel, curious your thoughts on this.
When you say, traditionally when you talk about shop class, you talk about manufacturing, and the purpose of those classes was to basically train students for jobs during that era, and particularly manufacturing jobs. So when you ask that question, the first thing is that you're thinking from like a 20th century perspective. Mm-hmm. The way I look at it, and the way I teach my students to look at it, is that this is a very 21st century tool, and we don't look at it as creating objects, but rather we look at it as creating content. And because when you think about it, this is a digital file. This thing exists in the digital and the physical, and ultimately what you're doing is that you're taking content. It is a creation. It's a piece of information that comes from you, and you're distributing it to other people. What kind of skill is that in the 20th century? There is none. That is a very relevant 21st century skill. So when it comes to this technology, what I look at it as, I think it's more of a next generation tool for the 21st century. It's kind of like, it's not manufacturing. It's content creation, and when you create content, then everything is sort of open in terms of where it can go, how it can develop, how is it spread. You have networks, everything of that sort. So the mentality is very different. So I really do think that it's more than just. I think it enhances the traditional studio environment, and I think that environment is what the 20th to 21st century office is going to be. It's going to be something that we're not very aware of, but I do know that there will be collaboration, there will be that creation, there will be creativity, and those tools are going to be a big part of it. So you really have to kind of think in terms of that, in terms of what tomorrow will bring, and for me, this technology makes complete sense.
Can you both talk about to what degree students are sort of leading the stuff that you're creating, and I'm curious if sometimes students are teaching teachers with this sort of stuff.
So some of the creations that we've made in the classroom, first of all, I have a lot of my students here, so they could tell you firsthand what we've created. They'll fact check you. Yeah, they've been amazing. So I want to personally thank them for taking the time out in their weekend to come as well. And wow, what have we not made? We have created, one example we actually created this school year was that we worked with a local prosthetic company. Across the street from our school, there is a prosthetic company that basically makes these very lifelike prosthetics, and they're all handmade. We collaborated with them to create some designs, some products for a particular object that they had that sort of enhances the function of the prosthetic. And so we kind of came in and we used a lot of design thinking principles, and we obviously placed our creativity and our creative hats on, and we sort of started developing new products and things that actually sort of went beyond their expectation. Basically what we were doing is that we were sort of redefining the problem, and we were kind of seeing new opportunities where they hadn't seen any before. And that kind of showed them that we were capable of innovating. And that's just one project, right? Another project that we created was part of our after-school class. So our student will explain to Millie. But yeah, she basically had an idea for the science fair as a science fair project, and she went and created this amazing product that got her an environmental innovation award. And that was like, I wouldn't expect that, right? But it was amazing to see that. Other projects that we've created, we've gone down to create props for our school musical. So, typically, props are a little bit hard to come by, and what makes this technology so great is that we can customize props for our actors. So We've taken it upon ourselves to kind of use the technology to kind of create these props, and it significantly reduces the price, especially if you're custom making it for your actors. We've done to that extent. Another example I have here in my hand is that we also use the technology to print trumpet mouthpieces. So, when you think about it, when students in our music department, they lose a lot of their tools and things of that sort. And one example is a trumpet mouthpiece. So when I was speaking to our music teacher, I told him about 3D printing, which totally surprised him in terms of the fact that we had one on our campus. And he just basically mentioned, can you print a trumpet mouthpiece? And I'm like, well, why would that be? Why would you want that? Like, well, one, the kids lose it all the time, but two, it costs a lot of money. This is a brass tool that they lose, and this costs what, $30, and it takes maybe a couple weeks for it to arrive in the mail. What we were able to do is print it in 2 hours and offer it to our students for free. And when we did the numbers, I mean, you're saving about $5,000 a year just by doing that. So we were able to take that technology and make it cost effective. And these days in education, everyone, teachers definitely, our resources are a bit limited, but we found an opportunity to create new tools and actually even improve some of the tools that the teachers are asking for. So we actually will take something and we can even potentially make it better.
Interesting. And at Art Center, what sort of how is 3D printing being integrated into coursework at Art Center?
Well, again, the design students, and that expanding toolbox of ways of creating it. 3D printing allows you to make things that can't be made in a conventional way. So it's kind of pulling design along. What students can do now is, if you can think of an idea that, the limitations to it may have been conventional manufacturing, the ways you would make it. With 3D printing, because we can take these very complex things and break them down into layers, it allows the students, an example would be wheels for cars. Everybody... I often, see cars driving by and I wonder how many more different designs of wheels can there be? I mean, it's infinite, really. And what 3D printing has allowed now is almost the second generation of that wheel design. Very, very complex ideas that, before that wouldn't have been a thought. It would have been, okay, well, that's really not a concept that we can make. But 3D printing for the students allows them to really push the barriers of design and come up with ideas and things that can only be made in 3D printing. And I think what 3D printing's doing is creating a whole nother range of products and ideas around the technology. So it becomes kind of self-serving that this idea can only be made on a 3D printer. Where's that going to go, and how many ideas is that going to spawn?
Right. To talk a little bit more about, the concept of using design, especially at the K through 12 level, we see such a shortage of art classes at the K through 12 level in Southern California. I think it's fairly few and far between schools that are able to really, offer design, especially at the elementary level. Talk to us about the value of design and what students can learn from the design process.
Ooh, I don't know if we have enough time for that. Design, wow. So let's look at it through the lens of what exactly is design. Design is solving a problem. So typically when you're designing something, you're using it to communicate, but at the same time you're using it to communicate this thing that ultimately solves a problem. So that thinking process, you could say, is design thinking. It's very much just creativity. And oftentimes we hear creativity, it gets a really bad rap, right? Like people think creativity is very frou-frou. They're sort of like, oh, you're just going to be creative, and it's really it's a level of thinking that frees anybody, that frees the student. So going back to this level of design thinking ultimately is in all of us, right? We can use this to solve many different problems, but the concept goes is, you want to be able to explore all the possibilities and do your research. So, for example, in my classroom, when we're using design thinking, we're looking at what the problem is, of course, and then kind of exploring what the different ways to solve that problem might be. And a lot of times that requires a lot of research, where we're just looking at all the different fields and all these different concepts. So we take these concepts and we sort of place them onto the wall, And we sort of do sort of like this mind map, as it were, when we kind of just, ask ourselves, okay, where are the patterns? Where do we see connections? Is there something here that we're not dealing with? What are the questions are we not asking? And then from there, we start to sort of have these hypotheses, and then we start testing out those hypotheses and start creating and generating new ideas that sort of test that. And ultimately what we'll do is part of that process of testing is to create these objects, design them, print them, and continue to improve upon them through different iterations. When you think about that, you might think of it as, well, that's pretty typical. No, when you really think about this, these are really important skills for students today for the 21st century. These are skills where they're going to need to be able to iterate. This generation of students is born into the internet. They know nothing but change, right? The students in this room right now, they're basically going to laugh at the cell phones in your pocket because they're going to say, hey, I remember that thing, and I remember when we used to charge those cell phones, and wow, you had to charge them every day? That's insane, right? They're going to look at those things, and you could even ask yourself that question too. 10 years ago, we used to call the internet, right? Right? And sometimes the internet was busy, and and today we get upset if we're at 35,000 feet and the Wi-Fi goes out. And that's a really important point. That's something you have to really take into consideration. The children here, my students, they have an expectation that things are going to change. Mm-hmm. And when you put it in that perspective, then that will empower them, but it could also scare the teacher, because then what do you do when your student knows these tools better than yourself? And how much freedom do you want to give them if that were the case? It's a whole new perspective. It's really a new level of classroom. I think I don't think it changes the classroom. I think it helps enhance the classroom experience. And I think these tools are going to serve the student as much as the teacher. And it's serving me because I get to learn with the student. Mm-hmm. So think of the classroom as not being this place where the teacher is the end-all, be-all person of information, but rather that the teacher is sort of the coach or the mentor, and that teacher is identifying the talent and putting that talent to use. And when you walk into our classroom, that's exactly what you get. We are equal in the classroom, and the students will have ideas, and they bring their own knowledge, and they will take information from the internet, and they'll bring it into the classroom, and we'll collaborate together. These are valid 21st century skills. That's basically what our district identifies as the 4 C's. That's creativity, that's communication, that's collaboration. And when you're being creative, you're critically thinking. That is higher level thinking. That is designing, that is creation. You're taking all these pieces of information and you're synthesizing it to create a product. That is ultimately what we want our students to do, is to be critically thinking about it, but also creating these products and learning from that experience.
A new level of classroom. I like that idea, a new level of classroom.
Yes.
Right.
David, your thoughts on that?
Well, it's very empowering, a 3D printer. What's happened, and touching on some of the things that we just said, is that this very iterative process of going back and refining the design and modifying. With a 3D printer, it's much easier than going back into a traditional shop and remaking the thing over. It's working in this digital medium where you can refine the file, reprint it. We have students who own their own printers, and they'll literally stay up all night, just have this thing, just keep tweaking and tweaking. And the ability to refine the design and change it so quickly is what's really speeding product development and product growth and change. Because traditional products, a few years ago when things were made, a kettle or a toaster or whatever, those products lasted a lot longer. What we see today is a very short product life, a new design or a new idea. The products change more, than ever before. And I think 3D printing has powered some of that, because it's allowed designers and students at Art Center and other people to say, okay, we can quickly make changes to a product and get it out on the market, get it up to speed really fast, whereas a lot of development and design and manufacture was involved in making prototypes. 3D printers really take prototyping to almost, jet speed. You can change the design so fast. You can make the changes. You can modify and improve, prove out things, prove out materials, and then bring a product to market much faster.
Great. I'm excited to bring the students up in a few minutes, but I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk, for folks who may be interested in getting 3D printers themselves, or for people here from school districts thinking about bringing 3D printers into the fold. What are things to think about? How expensive are they? Where do you start?
Well, definitely think about what your purpose is. Like, why are you bringing the printer in? Is it for, is it for an art purpose? I mean, sometimes from the teachers that I've heard, I mean, there's so many different applications. I mean, there are teachers that are using it to as a model for, it's sort of like a miniature factory. I was in communication with a teacher that was using it as a prototype sort of manufacturing process. And this printer represents, manufacturing in the world today. So they're using it to sort of as a model, and that's sort of a representation of that. There are other teachers that are using it for artistic purposes. So, design an object, create it, print it. Know your purpose. So why exactly are you bringing that in there? Some are using it for tools. I want to print these particular tools or products. We can print these objects. We can raise funds. So know your purpose. When you're considering a printer, obviously the cost is going to be the biggest factor. But when you're considering it, consider sort of, what types of material can it print? If it's ABS, PLA material.
And what's the price range? Where does it start? If you wanted to get a printer for your home, for example.
Yeah, I'm like thinking all these different things to watch out for. The price, this year is going to be the year where the price drops, basically. A lot of printers that are coming to market are getting in about $500 range, $300 range. They're very, very cheap, and they're looking pretty good. When we received them, they were about $1,000. But as time goes on, they'll get cheaper, and that's sort of the route technology goes. So they'll be essentially cheaper than an Xbox, let's say.
Cheaper than an Xbox, wow.
Yeah, and that's a fact. And so that's the cost is obviously going to be a factor. Print times, as the years go by, they do get faster in print. So the print times also count. How much does it cost for the spool material? You don't want to spend maybe more than $30 or $40 depending on the material that you're going to be using. What kind of material you're going to be using? You're seeing more materials going into market right now, like wood, and that are sort of mixed with like plastic. Almost you see a little bit of that on the market. So know your materials and what you're going to be using it for. Also durability. Obviously, obviously this thing is going to heat up and it's going to reach really high temperatures. So make sure that you're putting it in a safe location where the student's not going to stick their hand in and test if the thing is hot. Believe me, it's hot, and I've tested it, and I can fully attest to that.
Are there ventilation concerns? I've read a bit about what sort of safety concerns should parents and educators think about with 3D printers?
The safety concerns is definitely with the temperature and the heat. That's definitely one thing you want to consider as well. I know that there's always questions regarding materials and things of that sort, but particles and those things sort of flying around. No, I mean I haven't really experienced those type of issues. I honestly, it depends on the machine, right?
I mean, really understanding the materials you're dealing with. If you're heating up, ABS plastic, then there's going to be fumes. Well ventilated area, not breathing directly over the machine. Again, there's some common sense things, but there are safety concerns. I mean, a school like Art Center, we have 11 printers there or more, and they use different technology, and I think each technology comes with a different thing, whether it be dust with powder, whether it be, fumes with melting plastic. So again, just be cognizant, look at, the manufacturers of these machines are obliged to give you, safety data guidelines, read those kinds of things, be aware of what's going on with the machine. But in terms of, when we talk about price range of technology and the way the price is, like everything, they're going faster and becoming cheaper. But there's a lot of different types of technology. So one of the key things, like we're talking about, is what are you going to make with your printer? What's the deliverable? What's the output? If it's going to be something with functionality, then you need a robust material to make those parts. There's probably a dozen different types of material, right from what we looked at today was paper, right through to metals. Obviously, machines that are printing metals, these are machines that are really industrial machines. You're not going to see these in schools and places like that. But in the future, who knows?
And they're probably going to cost a lot more than an Xbox, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you're going to get a lot of Xboxes for the cost of one of those machines,
Yes.
I mean, we talk about the little hobby and the desktop machines down at the $400 or $500 level, $500 level. These machines can be almost at $1 million. So just to give you a broader sense of what's out there, is that wide range, that very home unit to this aerospace level of equipment that's out there.
That makes sense. One expert who I interviewed when I was researching this suggested to me that he thought 3D printers would be as popular in the classroom as overhead projectors. Think of the 90s, that sort of thing. Where do you both see this going? Where are we headed with it?
Well, again, I think it's really, it will be popular. I think, one of the things we've seen at the school is personal printers. They talk about a personal printer. It's just like having your phone. I think one of the things, there's two streams going on right now. Do we all need to own a printer and be able to print our own things and make it and play around with it? Or do we really want to make parts? Are we really interested in the parts that are coming off this machine, which is really a service bureau model? In other words, I want to be creative. I want to make designs. I want to do things. But do I need to own a printer and print it myself? Could I then send that file over the internet and have somebody with banks and rows of these printers print it? And I think, right now when you think of the cost of some of the lower end printers, it's real easy, like a game, like a hobby machine, to put that on your desk and just and work with it and play around with it. Is that the way it's going to grow in the future? It's going to be interesting to see,
Miguel, how long do you think Pasadena Unified will stick with 3D printers?
Well, I think if we continue to innovate and we prove that our students are using it as a valuable tool, I think we'll be okay. I think that as long as you have a clear purpose and a clear goal for what you want to achieve with it, our purpose is to expose this technology to the students, acquire relevant skills for their future. And if the tool is allowing us to think in that particular manner, then so be it. Then I think it'll be very valuable. And it's like any particular tool, right? Like if we have computers in the classroom, but we're using that to create things. We're using that to create content and distribute that and learn. If you're using it as a learning tool, which is in reference to that tacit learning, hands-on experience, because ultimately there is that level where we need to sort of experience this object or life in general. That tacit learning is extremely valuable, and I think that the student can benefit from that. So we can keep that lens or that framework, that focus within that arena. I think it'll be a useful tool for any particular school, especially our district.
Right, and again, one of the things about a printer is you link it, again, as you call it a tool, you link it to things like digital scanning, like 3D scanners. In other words, you're going to capture data, you're going to capture things that you can print on the printer that you can't do any other way. So I think the 3D print is obviously going to evolve and be around for a long time. It's going to be matched to other kinds of technology, other things that are going to come down the line. I think, the machine to actually physically make things and replace parts around the home and really create everyday objects that we can use as this kind of Star Trek kind of machine that, I need a new dial for my radio or whatever. So you can go right to a file, print it, consume parts that you're going to need in your day-to-day life. I think printers are always going to be around to do that. And I think, you look at handheld devices, cell phones and computers, the 3D printer, I think, will be right next to a computer in a lot of places.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and bring up our two students from Pasadena Unified. Kaylin John and Millie Root have been doing some really interesting work with 3D printers. Excited to talk with them. They're going to show us through a couple projects that they're working on. Kaylin is one of Miguel's students. He's a senior at Marshall Fundamental. And Millie Root is a middle school student at Marshall as well. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Great. Millie, do you mind starting? Do you want to walk us through your project that you worked on? So Millie, we should explain to everyone that you've been doing this in an after-school program.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Great. And tell us this project that you worked on. This is your award-winning project. Is that right? Great.
So I did it when I was in 6th grade. I'm in 7th grade now. So that was last year. My friend and I, Ariana, we were given a task to do something for a science project, do a project for science, and that would be an environmental innovation. And so we started with a problem, and our problem was that birds and bats were being killed in the turbine, with a wind turbine. And so we created a product called the Flyaway that would put out a sound that would drive the birds and bats away, so they would be less endangered in the environment.
Interesting. And how long did this take you to work on?
A couple weeks or so, just the printing and the board and the ideas all collaborating together.
How many different versions of your project did you come up with as you were working on it?
I think we did about 3, one of which is on the board right here, just so it can show. So we did one that was a really smaller than the one on the board prototype, and then we went back onto the software and made adjustments, and so then we came out with the final product, which is this.
Great, that's so interesting. And Kaylin, when I spoke with you, you were talking, one thing that really interested me about speaking with you was you said 5 years from now, school districts are going to be looking to Pasadena Unified and trying to catch up. Can you talk about that a little bit? That was an interesting idea.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that 3D printers jumping on early. I mean, Mr. Almena talks about it all the time. It's something it's new, so it's not something and jumping on early. I think we're forming a model that other school districts can look to, and we've made mistakes that other school districts can learn from and do it even better than we have. For example, we learned that you always should teach the teachers about the printers before you actually give them the printers. Because
what do you mean by that?
Because
tell us more.
Well, I was figuring it out during that time.
Well, no, it's a genuine mistake. I mean, what happens is you come up against this awesome technology and everyone's super excited about it, but the teachers are so used to doing things their own way, with the whiteboard and teaching in a certain way, and then all of a sudden getting this new technology, and it's a little bit scary. And I think that introducing them, saying, look what you can do with this, there's so much possibility here, really opens doors for being able to innovate in the classroom, going all the way down to elementary students and all the way up to college level classes.
And Millie, you're doing this as an after-school program. Give us a sense of how many kids are interested. What is the interest level in 3D printing?
I think if people actually know about it, then they'll be interested, but not many kids in my grade know about it that much. And just mainly me and my friends know and go after school. So if kids are educated about it and know about it, then I think they'll grow, then the interest in it will grow.
Right, and this is the first year your district is doing this. Kaylin, can you tell us about your prosthetic project you're working on?
Yes. So as Mr. Almena talked about earlier, we actually worked with a local company called Aesthetic Prosthetic, which is across the street from us. And we're actually in the advanced graphic design class. There are a few kids in the back who are part of the advanced graphic design class. And basically, this is the second year class, where the first year we learned principles of design. And then the second year was more, now let's apply it. And so the first project of the year was they came to us with a client, and the client, when they went to the beach, they put their prosthetic in the ground, in the beach, in the sand, and it left kind of a mechanical imprint. And the client wanted to leave a human footprint because they wanted to feel more normal, more accepted. And so they came to us and they said, okay, well, we don't want to design an entirely new prosthetic, because the prosthetic we have, we like and the client likes, but we want something that they can attach to the prosthetic that will enable them to leave a footprint. And so, as Mr. Almena said, that kind of opens your eyes. For the first time ever, we were working with an outside client, and we were actually doing real world management skills. We were working with them, and we were high school students. And this is what's so awesome, is actually getting to work with real companies as a high school student. It's not a class anymore. I mean, you're not learning. You're doing the work yourself. You're actually there doing the work, which is really valuable. And so actually, this is actually my design, and they were really interested in it, and it's kind of kicked off, and it's become really really popular. And actually, we're pursuing a patent on it right now. And so basically, the design is you can actually slide on different portions, different bottoms to your prosthetic leg. And so this opened doors. Not only did we answer the problem that they can now leave a footprint in the sand, they can feel more accepted, they can feel more like the rest of us. But these people can now open doors that we don't have. You can put all sorts of different slides on the bottom that, really opens doors and allows, and so my class, once they heard about this, I heard a lot of different feedback, that kids started getting really excited, well, we could do this. And I think just the excitement generated about it was really awesome.
Did you ever imagine that you'd be doing that at the high school level? It sounds like something you'd be doing in a career that you'd be happy to have.
No, and it's interesting because I'm definitely a math and science guy, and so coming in, I took Mr. Almena's graphic design class last year, and the sad thing was I viewed it as an arts requirement. I said, hey, I just need to get this for the UCs. I need to get my arts requirement out of the way, and then I'm done, and that was sad. But then I kind of got excited. I said, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and I really, really enjoyed it, and it kind of opened my eyes. And so this year, especially working with outside companies, and it's not just an arts class. It's integrating both math and science and getting kids excited about it, which I think is so powerful. And one thing that we've talked about, creating it, what the safety issues, all of the things, the process going into it. But I think something for our levels of students, something for our age, that's extremely powerful is that feeling after we printed this, and you just get to say, I made this. And that's something that's extremely powerful, and I think really opens the eyes of lots of students. And I'm excited to see that this is going to extend down to elementary school students and college level stuff. I mean, we're actually working right now on designing mathematics lessons using 3D printer technology so that students who perhaps are left out with the visual learning or the audio learning can now get the kinesthetic learning, hands-on learning that they never had before. And so we're starting off with algebra. We're working with fractions and the coordinate plane, x, y, and z axis, which is directly applicable to 3D printing. And we're taking this all the way up to calculus, which is, I'm a big calculus guy, where we're actually rotating functions around an axis, which is awesome. And then you can take it up to the even higher level, which we haven't quite dabbled in yet, but multivariable calculus. You're working with organic shapes and all these slopes and things like that. And I'm getting all geeked out now.
You're way ahead of us. I'm so excited. This is awesome.
Yes. But it definitely has potential. And I think that's opening the eyes of students and being able to say, all said and done, it's awesome, but being able to say I made this is truly a phenomenal experience.
Miguel, do you have other students who kind of come in, not by force, of course, but, for a requirement that get hooked like this?
Yes, and that's where it gets. That's what really amazes me is, and also, by the way, just going back to Kalen, I don't remember calculus, so as a footnote, Kalen had to show me calculus. So he has taught me how to do calculus. So I want to highlight that because as a teacher, you got to be open to that, right? Like if you're going to start introducing these tools, you have to be open for the student to teach you. And that's going to take a lot for a teacher to kind of accept. So I just want to say that, like, I don't know anything about calculus, but I do know what I know because Kaylin showed me. So
it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
And he does a great job too. Okay, and I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I was just asking you, yes. If there's other students who get hooked in this way, that get interested when they kind of came in as a class that they had to take.
Yeah, Millie's is a good example. I was talking to an after-school leader about the tool, and that person was very excited for the technology. Mm-hmm. So when he said, I know students that would totally love this, and Millie was a part of that group. Where we have it placed, it's basically an open view for everyone to see. I mean, I have a huge sign that says 3D print. And so students know this information. They already know this technology. And that kind of highlights also something else about the student is that the internet is already doing the work. It's already giving the information to the student. And so students are coming in knowing something about it. But occasionally they know something about it. But when I have them come in, it's really because they've heard from a friend, or students that have taken my class. They tell their friends about it, and oh look, I've made these different objects. So it's various ways. I mean, sometimes it could be as easy as just having a sign up saying we have a 3D printer, and then the student knows based on prior knowledge that what it's capable of doing. And then sometimes it's a friend that refers them and says, hey, this is a really cool class. We're using these really awesome tools. I mean, I see that as being sort of the way that students find out about it.
And I also think it definitely takes the enthusiasm of the teacher into account. You know, when you have a teacher like Mr. Almena who's extremely enthusiastic about the material and willing to talk to you after class, willing to spend that extra 5 minutes, you know, oh man, let's talk about this, and then literally getting kicked out the door as the minute bell comes in. I think the enthusiasm of the teacher definitely permeates down, and all of a sudden people who not necessarily would be interested in the arts, all of a sudden, you know, open their eyes and say, this teacher's an awesome teacher. I just want to take the class because the teacher's so great. So.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just having spent time in your class, it does feel like a workshop, and it feels very different than your typical classroom, for sure.
It's very much like a studio. Whether you want to call it a makerspace, it's very much like a studio environment meets a research lab. So, you know, the student can come in, and you have to be open to that. You have to allow students to come in and find out about it. But it's just that curiosity, it's that motivation, right? It's the interest. I mean, these are the things that we really want our students to have, right? Like, we want them to pursue their interests, so we make it very open access to that. You know, we give them open access for them to come in. At any point, ask questions, learn a little bit more about it. That does require an effort on the teacher's part. But when students come in, I'm enthusiastic about it, and yeah, I totally love sharing it. I mean, and you can see with the students that are here today, my students are here today. I mean, when they talk about it, it's like I'm just so proud because, you know, they're so motivated, and it's just like it's kind of hard to remind yourself that, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I was just like that, you know, and so it's great. I think that's.
Well, there's really a passion about it. What it is, it's a new tool. It seems to be a tool that they talk about 3D printing as like the second industrial revolution. Are 3D printers and these tools, you know, that are exciting these young students and down to these, you know, the younger and younger people that are going to be exposed to it and create things using the 3D printers, just that enthusiasm and that willingness to learn how to use the technology. One of the things I think it's grown along with the internet, I heard you talk about the internet more and more, and 3D printing and the internet are kind of joined at the hip. There's so much information, there's so much access to files and ways that you can make things. You can go on the internet and find out things, and then you can apply them directly to 3D printing with a very little, you know, sitting in a classroom, learning CAD, learning conventional ways of engineering, you know, talking about all the math and all the science. A 3D printer is just like, you know, there's a gaming element to it. It's an exciting piece of equipment that you can walk into a room with very little experience, like some of these students have done. That machine's sitting there, it's very transparent and exposed, and literally a young person or a student will go up to that machine and just tinker with it and make it work. You know, the intimidation level, I think, for 3D printers is really in an older generation than it is in a younger generation. So you guys see a 3D printer, it's not about how am I going to make that work? Is there a potential for failure? I'm not sure. Will I break it? I think there's very much an approach to, I'm just going to tinker around with this. I'm going to try and make it work. I'm on the internet. I'm playing with computers. This machine's linked to a computer. It becomes a very natural process for young people to print things.
Millie, have you done that at all?
Yeah, I feel like it's like you said, it's kind of a game. It's fun, and it makes you want to play with it, and it makes you want to learn about it instead of just like a class where you just have to go in there. But it's more of a fun, enthusiastic way of learning.
And
That's
if I could add on
interesting.
to that too, what David's saying is really a little big, much bigger than that. A lot of, if you want to call them millennials, this new generation of people, they are connected to the internet, right? But the way that they're thinking is very different to the way I'm thinking. I'm considered an older millennial, but it's a different way of learning. I mean, before I would have to go to the library and get access to information, and if that book was there, great. If not, that's where my search stopped. And of course, with the internet, we have endless amounts of information. That behavior is very different. Like a student comes in and they are learning without really knowing that they're learning. Mm-hmm. And that's really what a game is. If you want to look at talk about gamers for a second. Gamers, they're showing their skills, right? They find value through the showing of their skills. So it's no surprise that a lot of the software has a game-like quality, because ultimately it's when I'm in that environment, then I want to show off my skills because there's value in that skill. And so a lot of children, a lot of young people, they're kind of learning without really knowing that they're learning, because to us, learning is when you go into a classroom and you have X amount of time. But then today's generation of students, as soon as they leave class, they're learning, but they don't consider it learning.
Millie and Kaylin, I would love for you both to comment on this in terms of the way you use the internet and how that shapes your school experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's. I think the internet is just a massive resource. I think it's opened doors, but I really don't think it's a replacement. And as the same thing with the 3D printer is, people think once the 3D printers come in, they're gonna take over and everyone's it's just gonna completely jump over to the 3D printer. I think really 3D printers and the internet are supplements. I'll never give up on books. I love the feeling of having the books in my hand and smelling the pages and everything like that. Well, yeah, I love that. And my dad and I were just messing around the other day. We were looking at college textbooks and we just downloaded a quick PDF. And it's like, wow, I just got this in a matter of seconds. But it still is not quite the same. And I think there's just such a vast amount of resources on the internet. It's intimidating at times, but if you take that intimidation factor away and view it more as a resource, as I can take this, I can use this, and people don't care, it's all right, I can use this how I want it. And specifically for the 3D printers, we mentioned slightly earlier, there's so much information out there. There's entire 3D blueprints, essentially, that you can, if you don't want to go through the process of having to design a wrench yourself, you can go online and you can find a 3D blueprint for a wrench, and you can print that up yourself instead of having to worry about the whole design process. Now, some people love the design process, but I think really it's a supplement. It's something that can add on and definitely help.
Great. And Millie, what about for you? Have you learned anything about 3D printing on your own time, from YouTube videos or elsewhere?
I think the internet gives you an unlimited source. You can find anything you need, anything you want, whether it's for a 3D printer or just some video that you want to see. I think it's very convenient also. You don't have to you don't have to go through all that work. You just type in a quick little thing. You can do it from anywhere too. You can do it from your house. You can do it from your school, anywhere. I think it's very good.
There's Khan Academy as well. I mean, there's classic examples where the internet is just doing a fantastic job. The Khan Academy is just, it's videos, it's lectures on all sorts of topics, and if you miss the class, it's no longer game over. You can go back and you can
Explain
learn
to us, tell us more about what that is.
Khan Academy, I mean, it's amazing. Sal Khan, an MIT graduate, basically started off helping his I think it was his cousin with his math, and so his cousin was having a lot of trouble with it, and so he would make videos online and then send her the videos, and all of a sudden those videos kind of caught some tread, and the audience grew and grew and grew, and now there's an entire library of thousands of videos on topics, you can't even imagine, going all the way down to the elementary school and up to the college level, where you can learn chemistry, physics, math, art history, exam preparation, English, if you're struggling learning foreign language. I mean, there's so much you can do there that's on the internet but then again, it really is a supplement. You can't completely take out the classroom aspect of things, because I think it's really valuable that the interaction with other students who are interested as well, and that's learning in itself. And again, the 3D printer comes in as a supplement here, because Khan Academy can provide great visual learning, great auditory learning. But when it comes to the hands-on approach, it leaves those students in the dust. And so the 3D printer gets to come in and basically say, look, here we get to come in and you get the visual and auditory from Khan Academy sources like that, but the 3D printer, you can come in and you can say, I can make this, and then get that feeling, that awesome feeling of, wow, I created this, I created something, and learn from that.
Great. I'd like to also now bring up our elementary school students who are going to ask a couple questions. Pasadena Unified is really interesting in that it's also doing work at the early elementary levels. So we're going to speak with Kate Jennings and Janine Briggs. I'm just going to step off the stage real quick. They're going to show us their projects. I had the opportunity to visit your classroom, and it was really fun. You guys were working with CAD software. Could you show us a little bit what you've been working on and what type of stuff you've printed?
So this is a hand that we printed. So we came in class, and our teacher, Miss Anderson, the computer lab teacher, told us that we were going to group with 3 other kids and make a 3D item that represents a fraction. And so my group made a hand and painted 2 of the nails to represent the fraction 2/5.
We'll pass this around. And do you have some other projects? I know that you also worked on props for, was it a school play or school performance?
Yes, one of the electives was acting, and we made some props.
Sure. Basically what we made, we were doing a Alice in Wonderland play, and she was the Queen of Hearts, so we brought some of the things for the Queen of Hearts. The crown we attached to a headband, which was not 3D printed, and so that it stays on the head easier. And then this is another thing that we made. It's basically like, what would you call it, like a wand, I guess?
One thing I was really interested in when I went to your class was you guys talked about the value of making mistakes and how you still learn from 3D printing when you make mistakes. Can you talk about that a little bit? And do you think that, are you still able to learn when you make mistakes? How does it work exactly?
Well, I remember we tried to make this iPhone case, and every single time it would morph to the side, so it would not fit the iPhone. But we tried again, and eventually kind of made the shape.
Have you had any experience with that?
Well, I haven't done much 3D printing because we did an event with our class, so we're a little bit behind. We're in a different class, and we're a little bit behind the other classes. But what we have done, it's really easy to make mistakes when you're doing 3D printing. So, and when you do, it's always a learning experience no matter what happens.
How hard is it to learn how to 3D print? Do you think everyone in this room could do it?
Yes, I do, because there are complicated things that you can make, but then there are also simple things. I have an example right here. It's a little Minecraft character, and Minecraft is basically just a video game where everything is blocks, and blocks are really easy to make when you 3D print. So it's just a simple model, and it's not really that hard to make.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. If you're willing, I'm sure everyone would love to see your items if you want to pass them around. Thank you guys for coming up here. Thank you. So we're just about to go to audience questions. We'd love to hear from you, but David, I thought I'd give you the last word since you're at the higher ed level here. Kind of your overall thoughts on seeing what's happening, at K through 12 and where it's all headed.
Right. Well, it's incredible to hear students talk about the simplicity of it. And I think there is that we've kind of touched on, that fear of failure, of learning. I think it's so experimental that I really don't think there is a failure. I know we print a lot of parts, and listening to those two students talk about, things going wrong and fail. At Art Center, students print things, they fail, prints fail all the time. I'm looking at one of my technicians in the audience nodding his head. The machines, things go wrong with the technology, but it's a great technology. It's fast, it's quick, you can quickly catch up and remake. There really isn't a failure to it. It's about, okay, I figured out what it did that time, I move on really fast. So students don't fail at 3D printing. I think there's, right now, the excitement around 3D printing, in a way, even the failures are a success. So it's a process that young people are embracing. They want to try it. They want to make things. There is no failure with 3D printing. It's just really cool. And listening to those students just assures me that the future of 3D printing is safe and is going to go on forever. So I'm really excited about it.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and turn to audience questions. Just a quick note, all of the Pasadena Unified students will be here after we wrap up to continue with demonstrations if you didn't get a chance to check that out beforehand. But now we will open it up to audience questions.
Can't write if I'm talking. Okay. Hi there. So this is a question for the teachers, and I'm an elementary art person, so I would be fine with the tinkering and the failure and the experimenting, but I would like to make a nice, neat package of all of this information to present to my principal, and I wanted to know if you could tell me specifically what software to use in an elementary setting and what material is most reasonable, and if now isn't the time, then who would I ask about this specifically?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll jump on that. So the software that we use, that's entry that I recommend is Tinkercad, tinkercad.com. And so what it is, it's a computer-aided design software. It's a 3D software, and it has built-in lessons. So when a student comes to me, I put them on that software right away. Because the lessons are great. Follow the steps. This is how you would create this object, and it just gives them some the basic understanding of the software tools, and just making them just really aware of how to use it. And the students love it. They liken it to a game. So when they go about lesson 7, lesson 8, then I sort of start moving them into their project or what they want to create, or maybe you have a lesson that you want to implement, and that would probably be a safe bet to kind of bring it into that. In terms of like a package, you're using it for art, right? So if you're,
Well, it would be interdisciplinary, ideally.
mm-hmm. Well, if it's a material, the material I probably would recommend is like a PLA, because that's environmentally friendly. And so that's always a good thing to tell your district. Well, this is an environmentally friendly material, and it's it's biodegradable, and just kind of has a sugar-like sort of odor to it. It's not sugar, but it's based off of that.
Right.
So it has like a sugary base to it. So that's a safe material to use, I would say. But in terms of packages, it really does help if you have a little bit of a curriculum sort of planned out. And I've been very fortunate. I was able to sort of collaborate with other teachers and see what their needs were, and then we sort of came together and had this sort of plan set up where it was like, okay, we're going to concentrate on these areas in our lessons, and we'll probably have a project, and we'll use it as a method to express that. So.
Can I ask you for your after-school course?
Mm-hmm.
Was that science-based, or could the students bring any problem that they had?
It was a little bit of both. So the after-school program, they are science-based. So the Learn's after-school program. So it is science-based, but we don't necessarily have to stay with that also. It's very open. But typically when I've seen my middle schoolers come in, they do have a bit of a science background to it, because those are the leaders that are sort of recommending them to us.
But I've had students come in and say, can I make an iPhone, my iPhone case? So, and if that's the case, then I can say, well, I sort of reframe it. And I sort of say, okay, well, how about you make a better one? What would you do that would improve upon it? And then that gets them thinking, and then before you know it, they have other ideas that they want to explore. So, you have an opportunity to basically open up some problems to the student and just give them that opportunity to say, by the way, if you have some other ideas, then I'll be open to help you with that. And you're getting them to engage, and you're getting them to sort of think critically about that problem, hopefully, that they'll bring to you in X amount of time.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
But there is one thing that I think is somewhat daunting is to, which machine do I buy?
Right.
Which, in terms of a package is one thing, but basically, where do I put my money, bring in that machine, put it on the desk, plug it in, and start printing? And I think there is a resource on the internet called 3ders.org that has a really, really extensive list and price and performance of every little 3D printer out there. It's a tremendous resource.
Is it 3DERS.org?
Yeah, 3Ders.
3Ders.org.
Yeah, and again, even that, I look at it on a regular basis, becomes daunting because there's machines being added all the time, and that they're constantly, it's this leapfrog, now this one's doing this a little bit better than that one. And I think my advice to people is at some point you've got to take the plunge. You've got to get a machine. Now, will that machine that you buy be the one you're going to go, I wish I'd done this? Then now they've just brought out this new machine that does this. There's never, you would wait forever to get the perfect machine. Mm-hmm. So I really say to everyone, have no fear again. Go out, get a machine. I mean, at Art Center, I was talking earlier, we've actually started to get a little museum of obsolete machines that we've tried, and they didn't quite work out the way we thought, but when we got them, it was, wow, this is a great idea, let's get one of these. Now it's on the shelf with the museum parts. So you're never probably going to get it right first time. I think the experience of starting with a printer that you can afford, as you say, that uses a material that can give you parts that you can use, start there, and very quickly you will find its limitations. As advanced as we think this technology is, these small printers, they have limitations, and you'll find those limitations really quick. And then that's when you'll learn more and go to the next generation.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Toure, and I teach at a technical college. Excuse me. And we had a theater arts program. We had an arts program that was eliminated through budget cuts. So now we have a theater that's on the blocks for being demolished. So what I want to do is recommend that we keep creative space on our campus to do exactly what you're doing. So what kind of policy statement could you give me to help me convince the president that we need to keep our creative space?
That's a good question. I mean, we talked earlier about wood shop and metal shop and these programs in schools that are falling away. And is 3D printing going to replace that? Is it a cost model? Is it a safety model? Can we go out and buy 3D printers and not build a traditional wood shop or metal shop? And you talk about your theater space being repurposed for 3D printing and putting that equipment in. I think it's a great idea. If there's a space, one of the things I've learned at Art Center is we've run out of space. We need more lab space to put more machines. Having a theater sounds exciting to me, that we could fill that space with equipment and students working in there. I think, there's got to be a way to do that. You've got to approach people to help you do that.
Yeah, and I would probably say, it's it's an opportunity to kind of take it to another level. I mean, this could be like a learning space, right? So if the 3D printing, it can enable innovation, right? And I think that's like an important term. It's like if we're about innovating and we want to innovate, and corporations are talking about innovation, innovation is it takes a lot of discipline, right? I mean, to do the things that we're doing, we have to be very disciplined and to apply and to constantly seek research and be creative, But creativity is that's a very high level order of thinking. These are transferable skills, right? So, if, and I don't understand why the word creativity gets such a negative stigma, but really it's a thought process. We're enabling our students to have a particular thought process. We're freeing them from a limitation. We're opening their minds to these particular thought processes, and these are tools that are going to enhance the classroom, right? I hope that today, no one walks away saying that this thing is going to revolutionize education. It's like, what's going to revolutionize education is the student. But if the student has the tools, then you will see that student is going to do more than you could ever imagine. And then I think it'll be very difficult for you to, it wouldn't be difficult actually for you to convince them to keep it. Because, my students are a perfect testimony to that, right? They're explaining it, they're saying what they've done, and that is probably the most impressive thing. I haven't really said much, when you came in here, my students were talking about that. And I think that there's proof in the pudding, right? So, and I don't really know what that means, but but in reality, I think that if you can frame it, I would frame it in terms of let's just try it and let's see what comes out of it. And if you can get some signs of innovation and show that the students are doing some really amazing things, sort of like what you saw today, that might get you a bit of momentum going, right? We were very fortunate. We were able to get a generous donation, and I thank the man that did that because that opened up a lot of doors for us. Right now, it's easy entry at this point. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Okay. Next question.
Hi, my name is Pasquale. I'm an instructor at Art Center in the product design department, and I wanted to actually highlight something that Kaylin said, is that it is important that someone with knowledge of the program teaches it. So, and we're very lucky at Art Center that about 40%, actually more, I think it's more like 80% of the teachers are part-time and are alumni as well. And so what that gives is the industry knowledge that we have gotten from working on this every day in the industry. And then we can show the students why rapid prototyping or 3D printing is so critical for their particular industry, especially if it's industrial design. So I do want to emphasize that it is a great tool, but just like any tool, including a bandsaw or a mill or, garden shears, you need to know how to use it well. It's not a plug-and-play device. Unless you want to just download existing models, it's very easy to do. But if you want to take it to the next level where the creativity comes in and where you get to create your own things, it does help to have alumni or industry experts help sort of shepherd that process, even at a high school level, because we're lucky enough at a college level that we can already do that. So I just wanted to highlight that. I agree completely with that. It's very important to know what you're teaching before you can actually allow the students to explore their creativity that far.
Great. I know at Hamilton, where the elementary students go to school, they have a dedicated, teacher who just focuses on, a computer teacher, but focusing on 3D printing. Other questions? Right here in the middle.
Thank you. Yes, innovation takes time and change takes time, but they also both of them take money. And I'm here with PUSD and Pasadena Educational Foundation on my mind, and I'm wondering whether the school districts here in Southern California or up in one of the wealthy suburbs of San Francisco, whether they've set aside resources to develop programs like we have at Marshall, and whether that funding is guaranteed, or will we always be dependent on private funding for these wonderful programs that change the basic foundations of our educational system?
I mean, again, one of the things with 3D printing, maybe, the links to industry and the spin-off and benefits, when you combine, listening today to what high school students are doing real work, making things with the prosthetics, they're learning, but they're actually being productive, they're being industrial. I think industry owes it to education as these things innovate, they owe it to education to make this technology available to all schools. I think I've been around 3D printing for a long time, and I've seen kind of peaks and troughs in the way the big companies have supported education. I think there's a new sense of 3D printing right now where companies support education with equipment, with machines, with materials. And I think that's really going to help in some of the issues that you have with funding. I think we've got to look to industry, the companies that are building these machines, to help to foster the way that the machines are going to be used in the future. If these machines are going to be the next industrial revolution, it's going to come from students who are going to find ways to use these machines. So I think we should, education institutions should look to the manufacturers to say, we need these tools, and hopefully that'll do something.
Right, and it's my understanding it's pretty early days still. I know at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas this year in January, there was a handful of printer makers there with educational products, but it's still pretty early.
Yeah, it's early, but for a school like Art Center where we have all this equipment, we get education rates. We get the materials at a discount rate. We get the machines at education pricing. And I think the companies, they're smart enough to know that once the students get used to using these tools, then they're going to go out. They're going to be designers out in industry. They're going to buy kind of what they know, kind of what they grew up with the types of machines that they're using in schools. And thinking of it now, pulling up from middle schools and high schools and colleges, the entrenchment of this technology along with the software. I think one of the biggest things, again, is software companies like Autodesk that are giving away, very, very powerful software to students, access to free CAD software, to free scanning software. Autodesk do 123D, and it's just an incredible tool at the college level. And, down at the lower levels, if students can get to use that software, it's going to put them in really good shape in the future.
Great. Time for one or two more questions.
Hi, my name's Ashley. I actually teach 3D printing at a school in Orange County. And that was a great point that you brought up about 3D modeling software. It's a great tool, but you need to know how to use it. 3D printers as well. They're fantastic tools, but you need to either know how to use it or have the time to invest in how to use it, because they're not 100% reliable, Unless you spend
at the high school level, or just curious what age grade?
Actually, we start at lower school, and we do middle school and high school as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's a private school called St. Margaret's Episcopal School. It's in San Juan Capistrano. But that's just one thing I want to bring up, the reliability of the machine. So it's not going to be 100% perfect. You're going to have failed prints. You're going to have jams. You're going to have to take it apart, and it does require maintenance. So just wanted to bring up that point.
And that in itself is a learning experience to fix that machine and to make it work again. But what do you think? That's an interesting question. What is the biggest barrier to you to 3D printing? If when we look at this, we're always, okay, we're going to get it and we're going to do all these great things. What are the barriers for your school? What would be the barrier for you to be, productive or efficient with the technology?
Well, right now we only have more of the consumer-based printers, so we don't have any of the Stratus U prints, anything like that. So I think half of my time is spent taking the machines apart, cleaning them, and putting them back together. But there's new equipment and new hot ends that come out all the time that actually make the printers better. So you can, that's a great process right there with the students and learning environment. How can we make this machine better? What can we do to fix it? What can we do to improve it? So that's a fantastic thing there. And then also material availability. As it continues to grow and expand, we can use things like bronze fill and actually sand away that PLA and then have a nice bronze statue, basically. Or molding and casting and using like the resin 3D printers and kind of do the lost wax casting process right there. So there's a lot of avenues, but you just have to have time to invest in learning how to use the machine and have to know that it's going to fail, but you have to keep at it, basically.
But there's a level of hackerness to this, you know.
Yes.
You know, it's you get the machine or you get the material, you find the limitations yourself, you play around with it. I mean, listening to the students, you know, that level of experimentation is part of the process.
It is, and I agree, and I echo your remarks. I mean, the teachers do not want to be spending time fixing it, and I've advocated for that. I've spoken, you know, to a manufacturer too that I've mentioned that, like, we don't want to be, you know, fixing the thing. So support is required, and that's takes people that know how to use the machine, and that's really, really important. But again, we're like, you know, in technology terms, like 3D printing is like 2 days old. So, you know, you talk about a Commodore 64 or Mac, you know, those things weren't the best when they first came out. But today, now we see them as ubiquitous, and they do a lot. So, yes, it is very early, and thank you for putting in the time, because I know exactly what it's like. You know, you're printing, and next thing you know, oh, machines failed. But yeah, that's something that needs to be addressed. And yeah, I think more teachers need to kind of talk and say exactly what those needs are, because then manufacturers will listen and they'll improve. But it's definitely still in the very early stages.
And we should mention one thing Pasadena Unified, I believe, has done is built-in tech support with the donation that came with the donation. Is that right?
Yes, actually, the Pasadena Educational Foundation has been very, very kind to basically bring the program, but also recognize the limitations of the technology. And one of them is to supply a technician to support those teachers, because that's one thing you have to watch out. And so they've been very, very focused in terms of providing that support, and it's been great. So it's been going very well. And then, of course, to having a meeting, you know, maybe beginning or the end of the year, to kind of review how the technology is working, what the needs are, things of that sort, are important as well. So yeah, I thank them for also, you know, working out the logistics, but also bringing it in to the classroom, because it probably would take most districts a little bit longer to implement a new technology, and they've been very, very great to bring it in and to really see it fly to a level that I never could imagine.
Yeah, I just want to comment. I think it's really interesting because over the summer, I helped teach chess to little kids at the Pasadena Educational Foundation Summer Enrichment Program. And I thought it was really interesting because I went through that program myself when I was in 7th grade and up. And this past summer, they actually had a 3D printing class for elementary and middle school students. And that was really crazy and creepy at the same time because I remember walking through the class and all these kids, and there's printers right there, and the kids are actually creating something of their own at the elementary school level. And they're so excited about it. And so the Pasadena Educational Foundation, I got to say, just as a shout out, it really brought it right to the kids. And when I was taking those classes, you know, I was taking chess and you know, some art classes, but then now they're doing 3D printing at that level, and they were super excited about it. So I think that's awesome.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone so much for being here. Thank you all for joining us on a Sunday. I want to thank all of our guests, and a special thank you to the Crawford Family Forum team, Janice, who helped so much to put on this event. There was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes. So thank you so much. We hope that you all will stay in touch with KPCC's education team and join us for another event soon. And don't forget to check out the 3D printers if you haven't yet. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you.